The next stage of assembling the Triumph Trident engine is to fit the pistons, and then I can fit the barrel onto the block. So I had the I put new liners in, which I've seen in a previous video, and decked them, which a lot of people were surprised that I did that. But then ignorance is bliss, and what I did then, of course, was to find a rebore company that it could actually handle Trident pistons, cylinders, and I found one relatively local, and they were actually in the process of doing somebody else's block, so I thought, well, that was probably a good idea. The first thing that they phoned up and asked, was what piston to bore clearance did I want. The usual thing is that you'd find on the box that the piston came in, you'd find the details, but all this says is original bore and doesn't give you any idea of the clearance. So I tried online and various other places. The usual procedure would be to contact the company that made the pistons and ask what their recommendation is. Unfortunately, these are new old stock pistons, AE engine parts, brand name Hepalite, and as they're 60 years old, I didn't get much joy in actually finding any details. So I looked at various other pistons and on the interweb and things, and came up with a plan of 3.5 thou clearance. So the piston fits in the bore and has a clearance of 3.5 thou. That's okay. The other chap's pistons were being fitted at 2.5, which is a little bit tighter, but I think that the 3.5 should be okay. So the next stage to this, I mean, you obviously got to prepare the pistons. So I have the gudgeon pin. Actually, I have the gudgeon pin actually cooling in the freezer. One of the things that I will do is put a circlip into one end of each piston, so when I push the gudgeon pins in, it should seat against that gudgeon pin, and then the other side can be fitted in. So that's one job. The other job is to check the piston ring gap. The gap in the piston ring needs, when it's in the bore, needs to be the correct distance apart. The quoted gap for the Trident is 9 to 13 thou on the top two rings, and then the oil control ring, which is the bottom one with slots in it and a internal spring. Good to see that. Should be anywhere between 10 and 40 thou. So the idea is that you put the piston ring, let me pull that forward, into the cylinder bore, so you can see the gap is just there, it's very small, and then using a piston, you actually use it this way up, because that edge there is approximately the same height, or well, exactly the same height all the way down, whereas the bottom side is you only get 2 contact points. So you push the piston in and then you push it down such that you get to a point where you can see that it's actually level all the way around, and then using a feeler gauge you can actually check the gap, and that just goes in, and that is 13th thou. That is 13th thou. So when I try a 14th thou feeler gauge, it will not go in. So these are at 13th thou, which is at the top end of the clearance, but will be okay for this application because this is just a straight street engine. It's not a racing engine or going to be raced on the street or whatever. I mean, I'm 71 years old now, so I don't actually need the extreme performance, and we'll go with that. So what I'm now going to do is check the gap on the other wings. If the wing gap is too small, you actually have to be very careful and file one or the other edge flat and at 90 degrees to the top face, or as much as you can get, to actually do the get the gap right. Now, one of the issues with that is that the rings are very brittle, so you have to be very careful in filing them, or buy another set of rings, of course. You can get machines, little hand-driven ones and power-driven ones to actually set ring gaps, but I don't do this often enough to justify having one of those. So I will be back when I've checked all the ring gaps. The next stage of preparing the pistons and the block ready for installation on the bike is I have fitted the circlip at one end so that when I push the gudgeon pin in with the piston above the conrod, it will actually stop at the right place, so then I can fit the other circlips ready to actually then mount the part on the engine. The next stage, having gapped all the rings, is to actually fit the rings onto the piston. There's several ways of doing this. I tend to use feeler gauges. So what you have to do is to move the piston ring down past the first lands, and I always put the oil control ring, which is the bottom one, on first, having two feeler gauges at the front, and then one on each side, spaced out. Always a bit fiddly, and I usually have, oh, where's that one gone? Oh, there. I usually have reasonable amount of success. It's very easy to break these cast iron rings. So then by pushing down, you've actually got the rings actually held away from the piston, And what we then do is to ease the ring down. Ease the ring down so it's above the land where it needs to be, and then you can actually, holding the ring in place, drive out or pull out the feeler gauges so that the ring will actually go into the groove where it's meant to be. Now with the oil control ring, it actually hangs up on this internal spring, so you push that in and then you've got the oil control ring in there. Now with these rings, they are actually tapered, and that means that the each ring has a mark on it which is effectively, well, you'll be able to see that, but that actually on these ones says top and standard, because these are standard bore parts. So we'll do the next one. And as I say, we actually have you want to get a ring or a feeler gauge under the end, and then you can slightly lean it out, pull it apart so that it then slips down over the first land. We need to bring this one down to the second, so we actually pull it down, lining up with its home. A little bit of fiddle to get it in the right place. There we go. Don't worry about where the gaps are at this point. Yeah. So now we just need the final one in place, making sure we've got the top in the right place. Get some as I say, it can be quite fiddly. This is usually the time when you actually break a ring, because you're trying to get it done. Okay. Okay, so there we are with the rings around the piston, the gudgeon pin circlip is in. I'm going to leave those there. I have actually marked these, so this is number 1, which is actually this is the drive side, the single cam follower. They have 2 cam followers there. What we need to do now, after tidying up, is to put the feeler gauge kit back together, ready for the next thing, and then we have to fit the cam followers into their holes, and I tend to hold these in with rubber bands. I've seen people have metal or wooden or plastic pegs that go between them and force them apart. I've seen people trying to grip them from the top. I tend to put them in and then wrap a piece of rubber band around that and then take it around the fins, and that's worked very well for me in the past. And the rubber bands, if need be, can be sacrificial. So we'll get to that stage next. Oh, before we do that, we'll take the pistons out. As I say, I have marked them so I know which one goes in which, and we'll fit the oil drain dowels, because on here it doesn't matter if I drop them, whereas if they go into the engine they can be a right pain to recover. I find it useful to actually oil the bores while it's on the bench, so I can lay it down. It means that I can actually spread the oil around and get it fully covered. Without making too much of a mess. Having got the base gasket fitted, always a good thing, I have now fitted the support plates to actually hold the pistons in place. And you know, on this one, although the workshop manual says start with the other 2 up and the middle one down, with this you actually need to start with the middle one up and the 2 outside ones down. I have drawn a line approximately the same distance as the width of the piston ring clamps, so that I know when the piston rings have gone into the bore, because with this one the only gap that you can see where the piston rings are is just by the spring, and obviously not easily to get at when the barrels are sitting on here. The other thing is to make sure that you've positioned the release clamps in such a way, it's not so bad with the top one, that you can actually pull the release clamp out and it doesn't catch on the studs or the barrels. Because if you can't get this off, you have to pull it up a bit at least and start again. Next step is to, you'll note that I have actually tied strings to the piston ring circlips, piston ring clamps, so that if they do drop down I can still fish them back out. And I learnt to do this many years ago when using the original wide piston ring clamps with the screws, because otherwise they'd drop down in and you couldn't get to them. I have the barrels and I'm going to fit them on. Now, one thing about the barrels is I actually have all of the cam followers in place, and the cam follower, the single cam follower, is on the drive side. You can also see on the barrels that the front of the barrels has a square section, whereas the rear has a nice rounded section. So you know which way round these are going. It's a bit embarrassing when you put them on and you think, oh damn, they're the wrong way round. Yeah. So I know now, having gone past the line, and I can see there are no piston rings there, that the middle piston is on. So I can now undo the clip, and as I say, this one is the easiest one, and that then comes straight off. And we'll put that aside for the next engine. Now, the other two are not as easy. I actually have to get them, you need about 5 hands for this, to get them lined up. This one is obviously, the timing side is obviously further up the bore than the drive side, so we'll push that down and look to see, there's that going on. No, it's not down far enough. I think the ring has come out, so we'll put it back up a bit. Yeah. And reset this. Yeah. Always fun. One advantage of these clips is you don't need a screwdriver in there. It has been a little while since I've posted anything on the Triumph Trident engine, and that was because I had some issues with fitting the barrels. The barrels have been machined to standard, the pistons are standard, the piston rings are all standard size, so I just figured I'd put it back together. Now I did buy some new piston ring slippers, which are modelled on the standard piston ring slippers as sort of mentioned by various people, and they are a little narrow, so they basically just cover the piston rings themselves. Now that's not a bad thing, because of course it reduces the amount of friction as you slide the barrels on. However, I have 3 of them, and I broke a ring. In fact, in the sequence of events, I've broken 3 piston rings, which is not a good thing. And it turns out piston rings, standard ones, are now quite expensive. So unfortunately, I had to buy new rings, and a complete set. You can't buy them singularly. And as I say, I've broken 3. So I've got now to a position where I have all 3 pistons. I've never had this issue before. It's a little frustrating, and it meant I kept having to walk away and then come back later when I've calmed down a bit. So anyway, I have the barrels sitting on the pistons now, and I do have a base gasket fitted as well, because that's always fun when you actually get it on there and then realise, oh, you haven't put a base gasket on, take it all off, start again. And I ended up using my old piston ring slippers for the outer 2. Of course, I've actually been slightly stymied in that what I used to do in the past was, of course, fit the outer 2 and then fit the middle piston down through and torque it up from underneath. But of course, with these new pistons with the ARP bolts, excuse me, you actually have to use bolt stretch. Well, you don't have to, but it's advisable to use bolt stretch. So to that end, of course, I needed to fit the middle piston first at the top, and then bring the other 2 to approximate sort of correct place, and then push the whole thing down. And finally I used my old piston slippers, which I've used many times in the past, which are these type, and as you can see, to actually get them out, you actually pull them up so they fit around the cylinder liner, and then basically distort them and pull them out that way. And this is one of the reasons why the tightening bolt to set the piston ring compression correctly is actually on a piece of string. So when they fall out, as you're trying to get the slipper out, you can actually rescue them. And of course, the piston ring slipper will actually go back. You have to manipulate it a bit, but will actually go back ready to be used again. So I haven't pushed the barrels all the way down yet, because of course I actually need to fit the washers and the nuts while it's still up a little bit, so you can actually get in there, and then finally push the whole thing down, take the rubber bands out so the cam followers sit onto the cams and all that good stuff. So that's what I will be doing next. I should point out that I've actually got the primary drive lock-in plate in place to actually stop the engine rotating while I actually move the barrels up and down, well, down hopefully, to bolt it all together. Locking plate fits nicely, you just have to rotate it around a little to get it to line up, and then off we go. We now have the cylinder barrels fitted onto the engine, although I haven't quite finished tightening up the nuts around the base, and the engine will now sit for a little while. I need to sort the Naught Commander out, which is actually in the dining room at the moment, and build an engine hoist to lift the Trident engine up, and obviously bring the Trident into the dining room and put the engine in the frame. And then I can fit the primary drive outer and the timing chest and electric start and all those sort of things. So it's progressing. It has been quite a struggle this time. I don't know if that's to do with my age or I have a few slight medical issues, or just being a pig, because they sometimes are. I've built quite a few of them over the years, and I built this one several times, including after a devastating fire. So I will finish this video up here. I'm not going to put the head on or anything because the lifting frame fits onto the cylinder head bolts effectively, so you don't need a cylinder head there, and it makes the whole engine just that little bit lighter, which is a good thing. So I will finish this one up here and come back to it in a couple of weeks, hopefully, perhaps before, when the Norton's actually going. Thanks.